In recent months, Chinese state media has celebrated the J-35 as China's newest carrier-based stealth fighter, a fifth-generation aircraft supposedly comparable to America's F-35C Lightning II. The sleek twin-engine design looks formidable in photos and videos. Chinese military commentators describe impressive capabilities, stealth characteristics, advanced avionics, modern weapon systems, and carrier compatibility that will transform Chinese naval aviation. But reports analyzing the J-35's actual performance parameters point to a devastating operational limitation that Chinese propaganda carefully avoids discussing. The aircraft can allegedly stay on the battlefield for only 7 minutes after flying 900 kilometers from its carrier. If the J-35 has to engage in hard maneuvering, chasing enemy aircraft, or conducting aggressive combat maneuvers, that combat window allegedly drops below 3 minutes. 7 minutes. That is how long China's newest carrier stealth fighter can supposedly operate in the combat zone after transiting to the target area. 3 minutes if it has to fight aggressively. For context, American F-35C fighters can loiter in combat zones for extended periods, conduct multiple engagement cycles, and maintain a presence that provides genuine combat capability rather than brief appearances. Even more telling, when CCTV broadcast a segment about the Fujian carrier's electromagnetic catapult system, cameras showed a J-20 land-based fighter on the catapult instead of the heavily hyped J-35. This raises an obvious question. If the J-35 is ready for prime time, as Chinese propaganda claims, why are officials apparently nervous about showing it during high-profile media coverage? Today, we are going to examine why the J-35 has such limited combat endurance, what this reveals about its design compromises, and why showing a J-20 instead of a J-35 on Fujian suggests Chinese military leadership lacks confidence in their newest carrier fighter. By the end, you will understand why the impressive-looking J-35 might be another example of Chinese hardware optimized for propaganda rather than operational effectiveness. Let's start with the fundamental problem, combat radius and loiter time, because these determine whether an aircraft can actually accomplish missions or just make brief appearances before retreating. Combat radius is the distance an aircraft can fly from its base or carrier, conduct operations, and return safely with fuel reserves. Loiter time is how long the aircraft can remain in the combat zone, actually fighting or performing missions. Both depend on total fuel capacity, fuel consumption rates, and the mission profile. The J-35 allegedly has a combat radius of 900 kilometers when flying efficiently, meaning it can reach targets roughly 900 kilometers from its carrier. This sounds adequate on paper, comparable to other carrier fighters, but the critical issue is what happens after it reaches that distance. According to reports, the J-35 can remain in the combat zone for only about 7 minutes before needing to return to the carrier to avoid running out of fuel. That is not a combat air patrol. That is barely enough time to identify targets, engage once, and immediately depart. If the engagement requires aggressive maneuvering, afterburner use, or extended combat, the time window allegedly shrinks below 3 minutes. By comparison, American F-35Cs can loiter in combat zones for significant periods, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or even longer depending on mission profile and tanker support. This enables real combat air patrols where aircraft maintain presence, respond to developing situations, and conduct multiple engagements if necessary. 7 minutes is not presence, it is a brief visit followed by immediate departure. The math reveals the problem. If J-35s launch from carriers, fly 900 kilometers to the combat zone, spend 7 minutes there, then fly 900 kilometers back. That is 1,800 kilometers plus whatever distance they cover during those 7 minutes of combat operations. Total mission fuel must cover all of this plus reserves. Apparently, the J-35's internal fuel capacity is so limited that after consuming fuel for the outbound transit, there is only enough remaining for roughly 7 minutes of combat power operations before the return journey fuel requirement becomes critical. Now let's examine why the J-35 has this fuel limitation, because understanding the design reveals the compromises. The J-35 is a carrier-based stealth fighter designed to operate from Chinese carriers with limited deck space and weight restrictions. Carrier aircraft must be reinforced for catapult launches and arrested landings, which adds structural weight. Stealth aircraft require specific shaping and internal weapons bays, which constrain how much internal volume is available for fuel tanks. The J-35 attempts to balance all these requirements, including carrier operations, stealth characteristics, weapons capacity, avionics, and fuel, within tight weight and size constraints. The result appears to be an aircraft that prioritizes stealth shaping and carrier compatibility over internal fuel capacity. To fit within required size and weight parameters while maintaining stealth and carrying weapons internally, designers apparently had to accept smaller fuel tanks than optimal for extended operations, which reduces on station time and combat endurance. Chinese engineers might argue this is acceptable because carrier operations typically occur closer to friendly territory than land-based operations, reducing required combat radius. They might also point out that aerial refueling can extend range when necessary. Those arguments have some validity, but they do not change the fundamental operational limitation. A 7-minute combat window severely constrains what missions the J-35 can actually accomplish. American F-35C designers face similar constraints, but apparently made different trade-off decisions that resulted in significantly better endurance. The F-35C has larger wings than F-35A or F-35B variants, specifically to increase fuel capacity and improve carrier approach characteristics. These design choices cost some performance but delivered the endurance necessary for effective carrier operations. Let's talk about what a 7-minute combat window actually means operationally, because the tactical implications are severe. Imagine a Taiwan scenario where Chinese carriers operate east of Taiwan and J-35s need to provide combat air patrol over the strait or conduct strikes on targets in Taiwan. Even assuming carriers can position within 900 kilometers of patrol and target areas, this puts them well within range of Taiwanese and American anti-ship weapons. The J-35s can spend only 7 minutes in the area before fuel considerations force withdrawal. 7 minutes is not enough time to maintain persistent coverage. J-35s would arrive, conduct a brief patrol, and then depart. Any gaps in coverage create windows where enemy aircraft can operate freely. Maintaining a continuous presence requires constant launches and recoveries, and that puts enormous strain on carrier operations and increases pilot fatigue. If J-35 aircraft engage enemy fighters, aggressive maneuvering consumes fuel at dramatically higher rates than cruise flight. Using afterburners for acceleration or climbing, pulling high G turns during dogfighting and operating at high power settings all burn fuel at many times normal consumption. A window of less than 3 minutes for aggressive combat means J-35 pilots have virtually no margin for extended engagements. American F-35C pilots can maneuver aggressively, extend combat if necessary, and still have comfortable fuel reserves for the return. J-35 pilots must conserve fuel carefully even during combat, potentially forcing them to disengage prematurely rather than prosecute targets fully. This fundamentally undermines the aircraft's effectiveness. You cannot fight optimally when constantly worried about fuel state. The limited loiter time also affects strike missions. If J-35 aircraft are tasked with attacking ground targets, they have 7 minutes in the target area to locate targets, set up attack runs, deliver weapons, and assess results. Against defended targets with surface-to-air missiles and anti-aircraft guns, this time, pressure creates vulnerabilities. Pilots cannot take time to plan optimal attack approaches or wait for ideal moments to strike. They must attack quickly and depart, potentially reducing effectiveness and increasing risk. Now, let us examine the China Central Television incident that reveals apparent nervousness among officials about the J-35. When China Central Television broadcast a segment about the Fujian carrier's electromagnetic catapult system, a high-profile opportunity to showcase China's most advanced carrier and its newest fighter, the cameras showed a J-20 on the catapult instead of the J-35. That is unusual, and it raises obvious questions. If the J-35 is ready for carrier operations as propaganda suggests, why not show it during this high-profile media moment? The most likely explanation is that officials lack confidence in the J-35's readiness, or they are aware of problems that would be difficult to explain if broadcast footage revealed them. Showing the J-20 instead suggests several possibilities. The J-35 may not be operationally ready despite public claims, and only J-20s are available for testing the catapult system. Officials may fear that close camera coverage would reveal quality issues, design problems, or other flaws better kept hidden. The J-35's performance may have been disappointing enough that showing it publicly would create more problems than benefits. Whatever the specific reason, choosing to show a land-based fighter on a carrier during what should be a celebration of carrier aviation reveals discomfort with the actual state of the J-35 program. Confident militaries showcase their newest capabilities, nervous militaries find excuses to avoid showing them. This pattern fits China's broader approach to military propaganda, making ambitious claims about capabilities while avoiding demonstrations that might reveal limitations. The J-35 is heavily hyped in general terms, but rarely shown in actual operational contexts where performance limitations might become apparent. Let's address what this does not mean, because accuracy requires acknowledging what China has actually accomplished. This does not mean the J-35 is useless or that China has made no progress in carrier aviation. Developing any carrier-based stealth fighter represents a genuine achievement. The J-35 exists. Baput apparently flies and demonstrates China can design and build modern-looking carrier aircraft. This does not mean the 7-minute figure is definitively confirmed, or that the J-35 can never improve. These are alleged performance parameters that might be incomplete or based on specific mission profiles. Future variants could potentially address fuel limitations through design modifications or enhanced aerial refueling integration. And this does not mean the J-35 provides zero capability in any scenario. For missions close to carriers or with extensive tanker support, the aircraft might perform adequately. The issue is limited effectiveness compared to claims and compared to U.S. equivalents. But it does mean that if the alleged performance parameters are accurate, the J-35 has fundamental operational limitations that severely constrain its effectiveness as a carrier fighter. 7 minutes of combat time after a 900-kilometer transit is not the endurance needed for genuine carrier air operations. And showing J-20 fighters on Fujian's catapult instead of J-35s during high-profile media coverage suggests Chinese officials recognize problems they do not want publicly acknowledged. So what is the bottom line on the J-35 and what its limitations reveal about Chinese carrier aviation? China developed the J-35 carrier-based stealth fighter and promotes it as comparable to American F-35Cs. The aircraft looks modern in photos and videos. State media touts it as transformative for Chinese naval aviation. But alleged performance analysis suggests the J-35 can remain in combat zones for only approximately 7 minutes after flying 900 kilometers from its carrier, barely enough time for a brief engagement before fuel considerations force withdrawal. If aggressive combat requires afterburner use and hard maneuvering, the window allegedly drops below 3 minutes. This is not the endurance needed for effective carrier operations. Combat air patrol requires persistent presence. Strike missions need time to locate targets and set up attacks. Air superiority missions demand the ability to engage multiple targets and pursue threats. 7 minutes does not enable any of this adequately. The limitation apparently stems from design compromises, prioritizing stealth and carrier compatibility over internal fuel capacity. While American F-35C designers made different trade-offs that delivered significantly better endurance, Chinese designers apparently created an aircraft that looks impressive but cannot perform extended operations. When CCTV broadcast high-profile coverage of Fujian's catapults, cameras showed J-20 land-based fighters instead of the heavily hyped J-35. This suggests officials lack confidence in showing the J-35 during prominent media coverage, either because it is not actually ready or because close examination might reveal problems better kept hidden. The pattern is familiar. Impressive-looking hardware, ambitious propaganda claims, but underlying limitations that only become apparent through detailed analysis or operational testing. The J-35 might exist and might eventually improve, but current evidence suggests it is another example of Chinese military development optimizing for appearance over genuine operational effectiveness. Don't forget to subscribe for more analysis that separates impressive appearances from actual capability. Thanks for watching.